Good afternoon. It is Ryan with MBH Settlement Group in the Old Town Alexandria office, and want to provide to you another one of our cyber sales meetings discussion today. A little sneak peek into some of the changes that are afoot with the residential sales contract. Now, the actual new version of the contract has yet to be released. That's going to be another week to 10 days or so, but a little tickler, a little teaser today. I'll give you some insight into some of the changes that we will see. Now, these are all going to be effective the 1st of July 2016. So we're going to see them soon. But fear not, the changes are not significant. This is not going to change your real estate career in any way, but want to make sure you're up to speed with them. The first change relates to the deposit paragraph. Really just more clarification here. The deposit paragraph currently states that the deposit has been delivered or will be delivered within a certain number of days from contract ratification. It's not clear to whom it's going to be delivered, and new language in the sales contract makes it clear that it must be delivered not simply to the licensee, but to the actual escrow agent. Now, for those of you where the deposit is being deposited with your broker, by extension, having it delivered to you will satisfy the requirement. You can check the first box, it has been delivered. But if the escrow agent is going to be MBH as the settlement company, well, then you'll need to address the provision that it will be delivered within 1, 2, or 3 business days following ratification, so that you're able to properly document the transfer of that EMD following ratification. Second change relates to FIRPTA. FIRPTA is the Foreign Investment and Real Property Tax Act, and it requires that 10% of the sales price be withheld at the point of sale if an individual who is a foreign person for U.S. income tax purposes is selling their property. Now, this can come as quite a surprise when it comes up in the week or so prior to the settlement. This was added to the listing agreement to hopefully address this, but the problem there is threefold. One, oftentimes listing agents who are vested with this information don't know what to do with it. They don't recognize the significant repercussions. Secondarily, the party that really needs to know what to do with this information is the settlement company. And because it's not in the sales contract, we're having to glean that information from the seller after the fact. We send out our information request, they come back to us and let us know that they may be subject to FIRPTA, and then we drop the proverbial bomb on them by telling them that we have to withhold the 10%. That's problematic. Thirdly, purchasers. They need to have some input in here as well. If sellers are going to get the jump on the FIRPTA paperwork prior to ratification, they need to fill out paperwork that includes the seller's social security number. And oftentimes buyers, having no knowledge of this FIRPTA issue, are reticent about providing that information and giving the seller the ability to move forward. It's been added to the sales contract now, and what I trust will be a simple yes or no paragraph. The follow-up to that will be an addendum that is attached if the seller is subject to FIRPTA. That addendum will detail parties' rights and obligations and will provide the seller with a much more wholesale picture of what's to follow if there is going to be a FIRPTA withholding. So I think that's a good change for all of us, and will certainly make listing agents' lives much easier when this issue does come to fruition. A third change relates to the termite inspection paragraph 19. We've all had the same situation where a termite report is no longer valid under the terms of the sales contract because it gets outside of that 30-day window required in the body of the contract. NVAR has addressed this. Now termite inspections are valid for 90 days extension. So I've always recommended to listing agents, if you have any concerns, go forth, get that termite inspection done. That way you'll have a clean bill of health, or if there are going to be problems that will need to be addressed within the scope of paragraph 19, a treatment that is required or repairs that are required, that the seller can get the jump on them, or you can address it contractually if they are not desirous of having those fixes made. Also in there is a requirement that any receipts for work done or repairs made be provided. This mimics language in the home inspection contingency, where if there's work done, those receipts are provided to the purchaser. In this case, the seller simply has to provide them. It's typically going to be a lender requirement. The big change is the financing contingency. And again, fear not, I don't think this is significant, but we currently have a framework in the home inspection contingency where, of course, it goes forth for a window of time. During that window of time, the buyer can satisfy the contingency. Once we get past the financing deadline, the seller has the opportunity to provide notice of intent to void the contract. That window of time, the buyer has 3 days. 3 days following delivery of that notice. If the buyer does nothing within those 3 days under the current framework, the contract is void. In the alternative, within that 3-day window, the buyer can provide a written commitment for the lender or evidence that they're able to go forth, purchase the home without obtaining financing. That written commitment language has always been a bit nebulous, and so what we oftentimes get here is a scenario where a buyer is trying to procure a document from a lender within that 3-day window in order to avoid the contract being void. We've flipped this framework on its head now. Seller still has the opportunity to provide notice, but rather than being a notice of intent to void, it is a notice, a call to the purchaser to act. That within 3 days, if the purchaser does nothing, unlike the old framework where the contract would be void, in this case now after 3 days the financing contingency is removed, the purchaser moves forward without the benefit of the financing contingency. In the alternative, during that 3 days, the purchaser has the ability to provide over notice, simply voiding the contract, and they would back out. The reality here is that I would still recommend sellers, you're in no different position than you've ever been. That you're not going to provide that notice unless you have a better offer or you have cold feet. And so we have a scenario here where buyers and buyer agents are still, in all likelihood, going to retain that protection of that financing contingency, and I would recommend that they retain it all the way up through closing by not removing the financing contingency. More to come on this. If you have questions on that financing contingency, certainly feel free to give me a call and we can pace you through some of the details of that document. A couple other documents have been changed, notably the seller financing addendum. Each time we have a transaction involving seller financing, I get a host of questions from my selling agent, my listing agent, asking me to detail how the whole process works. I think the new version is going to be much more clear in detailing the process, the costs, and the terms. So more to come on this. Really appreciate all your time, and if you have questions, you know where to find me. Call me at MBH in Old Town. Have a wonderful day.